Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Torre Bonanno.
That's not the fun part, right?
Have you ever had parts of your life where you guys, maybe you were with your dad or around him or his friends where you felt in fear of your life from other people, maybe getting out of prison or anything like that?
No, by the time, I got old enough to, start being aware of those kind of things, they had left New York, in the late 60s. Of course, they did some stuff there in the 70s, and then by the 80s, really, he was pretty, Grandpa was most of the time, in Tucson or in California, because we lived in San Jose, California, and they were, they had some businesses going there. So really, from the mid 80s on, the only interactions we had were, we're going back there with my dad or with my uncle, and seeing the red carpet treatment that we got, and you walk into Peter Luger's, and the crowds just part, and you got the table right there, and it's you look at that and you go, wow, okay. So there's some juice still, of course, but no, I never feared that we were under any imminent danger from an attack. Now, feeling that the government's out to get you, yeah, absolutely. Seems like we were always having, they were always out to get, especially my father. They knew they couldn't get, Joe, so they really went after my dad and, my uncle Joe, my dad's younger brother. So they were always in, involved in some sort of indictment or getting investigated in some way, shape, or form. And that's really what Grandpa spent all his money just fighting. He called it the Gestapo, the FBI. So
I'm surprised that they didn't try to clump him in with the commission case.
Well, he was dead by the time well, he didn't die until 2002, but he was obviously not involved in any activities, because they didn't bust him for the commission stuff. They busted him because they were able to establish the RICO laws and make sure that they were able to indict him that way. Well, he wasn't active in any of that stuff. I mean, he was 50 years ago, as he described in his book, but in the 80s and 90s, there was nothing. Plus, they had him on the ropes. They were looking at him for other things, and my dad. So he wasn't one of the active guys in New York, and Giuliani couldn't cash in on the name. So, well, I guess that's probably not true. If they would have got Joe Bonanno even at that time, something.
Yeah, but, even old and in a wheelchair, they don't care.
Right, but they weren't. They were gone. They were far removed by that time. So,
did you ever speak to your father about your grandfather leaving New York and going to Arizona, and the whole reason behind it?
Well, in 1971, there was a movie called, there was a book called Honor Thy Father. It was a New York Times bestseller written by Gay Talese, and they made a movie, right? And in that movie, it was all about the Bonanno Wars and the whole exile, the disagreement over, the plot to kill Gambino and Lucchese, that they blamed on, my grandfather, and, then his exile to Arizona. So, in 71, I was only 8 years old. So
he got kidnapped too, didn't he?
And he got kidnapped at, well, that was in the 60s as well. But anyway, I forgot where I was going with that at this point. So
it's all good, man. I'm all over the place anyway. I just wing it,
Yep.
And then, so what I want to know is what's next for you with what's your goal on here? Are you going to get a show? Are you going to, what's your goal?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a set goal or even a written goal. I've been trying. It all started when, after I was trying to get this movie made. My dad wrote a book with Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone. It's a novel called The Good Guys. And, Joe Pistone was Donnie Brasco, but the story is about when the Russian mob came into Brooklyn, and the story is told by one chapter by the FBI or Joe Pistone from their perspective, and the next chapter by the mafia perspective or my dad, right, in his voice, and it's the same story but from both sides. And I think
It's
it'd be a
awesome.
fantastic movie or miniseries. So several it's more than several years ago now, about 10 or 15 years ago, we were trying to get that made into a movie. And I don't know if you've ever gone through that you know process.
I've seen people go through
Anyway,
it. I have
I'm
friends
going
that
to
did
use
it.
a expletive, but it's not it's you get these people that promise you all this stuff, and it's just like, hey, give me 5,000 and I'll turn it into 50 for you. I say, hey, no, here's the product. Why don't you give me 5,000, and when you make 50, we'll split it, or you can 80-20, whatever the deal was. But I never got to that point.
Yeah.
So since then, you've been trying to figure what else to do. Kind of gave up, right? It's like, what are we going to do now? And then along comes this whole podcast sphere that kind of has blown up. And a friend of mine from when we used to play Pop Warner football, he had a nephew that's that was interested in all this, and he reached out to me, and he's making all these connections happen, and he's inspired me. And I said, yeah, let's do this. Let's figure something out. So now it's happening. So yeah, now we have to come up with a plan. I know content is king, so I can provide a lot of content. I'm trying to develop some merchandise, some hoodies, and because I look at Francese and Sammy the Bull, they're selling merchandise, and apparently they're doing pretty well with that. And so why not get in on that? And if I can get my own show, I don't know, I could carry my own show, but I do have a lot of connections with people within our family who all have interesting stories and different interesting takes that might interest some people. So
Yeah, it's a different take on things instead of always from the criminal aspect of things. I want to hear from the people who weren't on the criminal side of it and the way it affected you. Like your father going to prison. How did that affect you?
well, when you're a kid and your father's in prison, you ask why. And I had issues as far as my behavior. I short tempered. I was a hothead. Um, and when you don't feel like there's anybody there, dad's not around, so who's going to stop me? You get it.
Yeah, yeah. And then here comes grandma with the
Well,
spoon.
then,
Right?
right. And they talk about wooden spoons. I mean, they use rolling pins. So they're Sicilian. They didn't mess around. Um,
Did your grandma call it sauce or gravy?
yeah, she called it sauce. Yeah, and they always called it sauce. So, um, but I know we have relatives, in Rhode Island that would disagree with that. So, but in our family, it was always sauce.
So, do you remember the last big holiday you guys spent as a family with your dad and everything?
The last big holiday. Wow. Not any one specific, but I know that my dad had, he was always having these gala events, from my sister's first wedding to my grandfather's 90th birthday, his 95th birthday, my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. I mean, just at the 50th wedding anniversary, it was at a resort in Tucson, and just pretty much everybody we knew had ever known. It seemed like had gotten a room and was there, and enjoyed that party. And it was great. It was great food. Open bar, and just everything was top notch. First class. And it was at the El Conquistador. I don't know if you're familiar with that in Tucson, but
No, I'm from the East Coast, man. I'm from
yeah.
Connecticut.
Well, it's just one of those quintessential, resorts in Tucson at the base of the Catalina Mountains, and it's just it was a great party. So those I remember more than specific holidays. And there was an Easter back in the '70s where 60 Minutes filmed us.
Yeah, I have a clip of that. I can incorporate it into this video. I'm going to talk to the guy
Yeah,
who has
you'll see my mug. It was much thinner then, of course, but I'm in that clip. If it's the one I'm thinking, it's the most popular one. And
yeah, with the whole family sitting around, right?
sitting around, right? Yeah, that was